Who are you? Beneath the expectations, the labels, and the societal conditioning, what does it truly mean to become you? I'm John Fleming, the founder and lead practitioner of Becoming You. I created Becoming You out of a desire to share my own experience of becoming myself and to support others who are curious about who they are. From a young age, I have been driven by a desire to figure out who I am, why I'm here, and how I can belong while being myself. This is Becoming You, the podcast. Conversations about uncovering, embracing, and being your true self. A place where I dive deep into what it means and what is required to live life as your most authentic self. Through real, honest, and grounded conversations with professionals and people who are walking the path. If you're curious about identity, authenticity, and personal freedom, your own or others, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Hey Martin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, John. It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, great to have you. Martin, do you want to introduce yourself, say a bit about who you are?
Sure. My name is Martin Duffy. I run the Oaktree Charitable Trusts here at Dundee Park, where we have a Transperson Institute and a school for Shamanic Studies, the Irish Centre for Shamanic Studies. I suppose we go back, I'm what you'd call a boomer, born in 1956. Grew up a lot with the kind of original New Age movement, the hippie revolution. A lot of people working with psychedelics, and then the great thinkers come out of that, Ram Dass, Stan Grof, and all the great thinkers of that time, Timothy Leary. And so there was quite a real revolution in thinking and psychology. But I grew up in a family that were kind of what we call folk healers. My grandfather was a folk healer and my mother also. So I grew up with this sense of the other world, fairies, the old folklore, and very close to nature because I grew up in a small farm in North Louth, just outside Dundalk. So that kind of thing wasn't new to me. My folks and the people around me, we had this, back in the 1950s, 60s, there was a more kind of community vibe to Ireland, and people were into that kind of thing. And then went to school, then studied psychiatric nursing. I started nursing in the late 70s, and I worked in the mental health system for 35 years as a community mental health nurse. And during that time, I've been quite disenfranchised with the whole psychiatric system, the way people are being treated with a biomedical model and just drugs and pharmaceuticals. And there was no real sense of other ways of helping people. So I studied counselling, originally humanistic counselling, which led on to studying Jungian psychotherapy and psychology, which led me on then to studying the work of Carl Gustav Jung. Did a lot of time studying Jungian work, and transpersonal psychology with Stan Grof, which included holotropic breathwork, which is an experiential method of getting into deep process and cathartic deep trauma from within the psyche. And that led on to shamanism, where during my own holotropic sessions, I had spontaneous shamanic experiences, which was no surprise given the childhood I had. So I went and studied shamanism in South Africa, in the Amazon, Mongolia, and Mexico. And in 1997, I opened up the centre here at Dundee Park. We created a charitable trust because I wanted an alternative to the psychiatric system. I was fed up of people being mistreated, misdiagnosed, and misunderstood. So we've been here for 27 years now, and we run courses in transpersonal psychology and shamanism, both online but mostly in person, because we have 25 acres of parkland here. And a lot of the work is done outside in nature because it's a big part of getting people to reconnect with nature, get them out of the digital addictions that people are into nowadays, and back to nature, and back to their own nature, and back to their inner selves, and reawakening the imagination in people and connecting them to their own wisdom and their inner healer within. So that's a kind of a brief overview of where I've come from and where I am now. And I'm still continuing the work. I retired from the HSE 15 years ago to devote my time fully here. And it's going from strength to strength. This work is really opening up and appealing to a lot of people of the different generations now. So we have people from 9 to 90 here. So that's where we are now, and that's where we'll be going forward.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing, Martin. and looking forward to getting into a deeper conversation today around shamanism and your perspective on how that might inform who we become in any given lifetime.
Yes.
Before we dive into that, I do have a question for you from our last guest, who was Jane Morris, and I was having a conversation with her about burnout. And her question to you is, if you woke up tomorrow and felt more alive than you do today, who would you be?
Well, I'd still be me, because every day is about becoming more of ourselves, myself. That's an ongoing journey. I'm always searching, studying, journeying, meditating, connecting to nature, because, I'm in awe of the unfolding nature of reality, the idea that we create our own reality. So the more I know my inner self, the more I know that my reality is not fixed, and that I have the ability to shift timelines. I have the ability to draw into my life people, situations, and experiences that resonate with my own inner energy field, my own unconscious. So the more I work on myself, which is a continuing, ongoing process, because I don't believe we ever arrive anywhere. We're always in the process of becoming. And so every day is a new adventure for me. It's an adventure of self-discovery. And I enjoy that journey now. I have more time for it. I'm not as busy, caught out in the mad matrix world anymore. And in actual fact, I devote my whole life towards the inner journey now, because for me, it's the only game in town. There's nothing else really matters. We have to, if we don't know ourselves and we don't know what's motivating, it's like we're like puppets on the string of our own complexes and unconscious, and therefore more easily manipulated and played by the matrix control system that we actually live in, this simulated reality and, social media, all that kind of thing. So it's that old adage, know thyself, and that's what I live by. So yeah, I become more of who I am, I suppose.
Yeah, nice. Which I like what you said there about that's an onward journey. Like there's no destination.
Yes. Yeah. And I think in terms of lifetimes, not just one lifetime.
Yeah. So Martin, who have you been becoming? You shared some of your professional and personal kind of history there in your introduction. What has been going on for you in your becoming process up until now?
Well, I suppose the main shift and change for me in the past while has been more of a withdrawal from the external game of life in terms of ambitions, desires, wants, needs, projections, all that kind of thing. And it's more about being self-reflective and, being in awe of my own soul essence. That still small voice within me that keeps calling me ever deeper on that adventure of self-discovery. And it unfolds day by day. Like when I go to bed at night, I dream, and I get up in the morning and I look at my dreams and I see what the unconscious is trying to relate to me that I'm not aware of in everyday existence. Because we know from a Jungian perspective, dreams are compensatory. So if you're dreaming about something at night, it means that there's something that you need to look at in your daily life. And then I take those dreams and I do a shamanic journey with them to get insight and awareness from the spirit world and the guides there to see what the dream is trying to show me. And then I align myself with the wisdom of the dream, the wisdom of the trees when I walk amongst nature, what I call stalking awareness. And I sense into nature, and nature speaks to me, as it does to us all if we take the time out to listen. You can hear it in the wind, you can hear it in the earth. There's a voice in nature there. And when we tune our frequency, in terms of brainwave states, like most people spend their lives in the beta brainwave state, left brain, analytical thinking, constantly going around in the mind, the monkey mind, like the mind virus constantly playing out with them. But when we take some time out, we drop into the alpha stage, we get into more relaxed, contemplative, meditative state. And then even deeper than that, when we get into theta brainwave states by shamanic journeying or deeper work, then we're into opening the mind's eye into the world of imagination, where we can access parts of ourselves and other realities, because I believe we're hyperdimensional beings. We can shift between different realities. The shaman always talked about being a shape shifter, meaning that who you think you are in terms of your physical body, your ego mind, and your thoughts about yourself, the mental processing going on in your head, is not who you are at all. Like when you were born, you were given a name, an identity, a nationality, a religion, a religious upbringing. You went to school to be programmed into the system so you could fit into the matrix. But that's not who we are. I mean, the sole essence of who we are is eternal. And it's beyond all that. So that's what I'm constantly looking for, searching for. Becoming, I suppose, more of what I really am. And that's just peeling away the layers of illusion and the layers of self-deception that have encrusted around my ego state that is actually keeping me from the truth. So it's like who I am is already in there. I'm just digging down through that incrustation to find the gem of spirit and spark of spirit and soul that is what I really am. And that's eternal. That has never been not.
I like that. In Becoming You, I often refer to uncovering, which
Yes.
I think is that what you're saying, peeling back, and then the need to embrace what we uncover.
Yes.
And the wonderful joy it can bring to really embrace that spark of self or of soul or whatever you refer to it as, when you get closer to it, or you see a new side to it, or you paint in more of the picture of it, or whatever. Yeah, it's a joyful experience. So Martin, from a shamanic perspective, what's your way of working with people in supporting them in uncovering who they are and becoming themselves?
Yeah, I mean, when I look back at the different systems I trained in, psychiatry and psychology, even psychotherapy, I see psychiatry only treats the biochemical problem. It sees all manifestations of distress and human suffering as something to be diagnosed, labeled, categorized, put in a box, and then given a chemical to fix it, which is totally inadequate, to say the very least. And then psychology goes along and it looks at the mental process of the mind and behavioral studies and how we are. And again, it's very much at the surface. But then when we drop down into the transpersonal, which means anything beyond the personal, that includes the psychospiritual aspect of the person, we discover that shamanism has been around for over 100,000 years, and our indigenous ancestors related to the earth and to nature and the world as if it had spirit. And it wasn't because as if it had spirit, it is ensouled and it is inspirited. And they recognized that they were a manifestation out of that energy, out of Mother Earth, out of Gaia. And they then had means and methods of ways of tuning in to that wisdom within themselves and within the earth, and what Jung would call the collective unconscious. Now, in order to do that, they developed different techniques for the sacred. They used drumming, teacher plants, fasting, sensory isolation like vision quests, anything to take them out of the ordinary drudge of everyday life and drop them out of that beta mind state, that brainwave state, into the deeper alpha and theta states. So drumming, breath work, yoga, meditation does all that. It brings us more into the right brain theta mindset, where we have access to our deeper imagination, healing abilities, and knowledge within ourselves. So most of the work I'm doing these days, as I said, I train in classical psychotherapy and talk therapy, which I think is very valuable, and I still use that as part of the work I do. But I don't see people for ongoing psychotherapy anymore because I don't have the time, actually. I mean, my appointment list in the net has here now are booked out till the end of May at the moment, because people are finding that their regular psychotherapy and counselling is working for them up to a point. And then they find that they're looking for something more and something deeper. So their therapist or the psychiatrist or they themselves refer themselves here. And what I do is I work with the deeper meaning of the dream time images that are coming through for them in their dreams or in their everyday life. And what I will do is I'll bring them on a journey using the drum. You see, shamanic drumming is 4 to 7 beats per second. The brain has a frequency following response, which means they can tune themselves down into that trance state and then journey through the mind's eye into the imagination and connect what we call spirit guides into what the indigenous people call the dream time, non-ordinary reality, the other world, the imagination, whatever you want to call it. And what we find is quite remarkable, that each and every one of us has access to an inner healer within ourselves, a deeper wisdom within our psyche. But also, when we tune into nature and the spirit world, we find that we have guides there. Now, those guides in traditional shamanism can be what we call power animals in the lower world. The lower world is a place of extreme nature and beauty and the natural world. And so the animal is a representation of the power. Say the bear, you get a power animal as a bear. You're meeting the archetype of the bear, you're meeting the species, or the wolf or the eagle. So when people meet a power animal, they feel emboldened, they feel enlivened, they feel that they have an ally, a guide that is there with them on their journey. Like, for example, I work with people who went through child sexual abuse. And a typical journey that I've done several times with people would be, they would connect with, say, a power animal like a wolf or a bear. And then they would journey back to the time when the abuse happened, confront the abusers while it was going on, and for the first time didn't feel alone in that situation, and then had a catharsis or a healing because they felt empowered to deal with the situation. Or they could journey to other situations where they go in middle world life. They can go into a difficult situation like an interview or something that they feel they can embody the power of the wolf or the elk. So it's very real. It may be kind of strange kind of thing for people who haven't experienced it, but once you drop into that space, you remove your skepticism, you open your mind, and you become aware that we have allies and helpers in the other world that can be really there for us. And then I can go on, if you want, I can talk about the upper world and spirit guides and who we meet there, ancestors, that's more of the work as well. And then soul retrieval, power animal retrieval, extraction, psychopomp work is part of what we do here as well.
I'm really intrigued about soul retrieval and how that, what does that even mean, I suppose, as a starting point?
Yeah. So if you think about it from a spiritual or transpersonal point of view, and you look at the old teachings from the Rig Vedas in Hinduism, or deep esoteric thought in Buddhism, or other disciplines, other spiritual philosophical paths, they will say that in the beginning was the supercosmic mind, the cosmic consciousness, that separated from itself, individuated and involuted down into physical matter, to have an experience of third density reality. So therefore, in order to do that, it had to create, spirit had to manifest a soul, which is the interface between spirit and matter, that then animated the physical body in order to grow this suit, this VR set that we're in order to enter into physical matter and into the physical world. So the soul then could be described as a kind of plasma, energetic, the way I like to describe people is kind of a glowing energy ball, blue, white light it could be, a pulsating plasma energy field, a field of consciousness that animates this physical body. Now, that soul essence can be delicate and can be damaged in ways if we undergo severe trauma. So early childhood abuse, the birth trauma, other things can happen. What can happen is that can impact on that energy field, that soul, which then, as a survival strategy, an adaptive survival strategy, because if the person and the soul essence was fully there while they were being severely abused or tortured or suffering in some way, then the whole system might collapse and the person might, become, psychotic or, dismembered within themselves. So what happens is that part of that soul essence, usually the kind of vibrancy, the joyful, ecstatic part of ourselves, leaves the place where the trauma is happening and goes off into a safe space. It can be another dimension. Usually people remember as a child when they've been traumatized or abused that they're disassociated. Part of them is outside the body watching what's going on. And that's the soul part that we call. It's a kind of part of the holographic whole. Now, sometimes that soul part doesn't come back because it's fearful or doesn't know the abuse has stopped or whatever. And then that leaves the person suffering from the symptoms that we call soul loss, like depression, addictions, feeling spaced out, feeling like they're not present here, feeling like life's not gaining traction for them and that they're missing something. They're always searching for something. Now, in cultures, in traditional indigenous cultures, what the shaman would do and what we do as shamanic practitioners is we take a journey into that other world and we track the soul part to find out where it went. And then we might find a little girl, little boy back in energetic form where the trauma happened. And we convince and control it to come back with us. So we bring that energy back, that little ball of energy that's separate from the whole of the energy field of the soul. And then we reunite it by blowing it back in through the heart chakra and the crown chakra, reuniting it with the energy field of the person again so that they can become whole again. Now, when I first discovered this idea of soul loss and soul retrieval, it took me a little while to get my head around it because it didn't make sense to me from a psychiatric or psychological point of view. But then I put all that aside and I did the work that I was taught by the shamanic people that I studied with. And I found as a psychotherapist, several things were starting to happen. People were having memories of things that they had blocked off from the psychist that they had not remembered, and they were able to retrieve those memories in order to work them through and integrate them psychologically. They also felt more grounded, more present, more in line with their life's journey. And they also felt they were coming alive more. People talked about their tastes coming back, their sense of smell, their sense of presence in themselves. They weren't going around disassociated as much all the time. So I worked with that. And what happened was actually, when I was practicing psychotherapy, I would interchange with shamanic healing at the time. And I found that the length of time that I needed to work with people lessened by 50% sometimes. Because now I was working with the person who was there. Often when I was working with clients, they weren't present. They had no memories of the events and they were disassociated. But when I do a soul retrieval with them, bring back those missing parts, then I found that I had something to work with and the healing happened much, much more rapidly. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, what soul loss and soul retrieval is.
I really liked what you said about the first time I came across it. It didn't make sense. Like there could be people listening into this episode who go, oh, that sounds maybe religious or it sounds like a doctrine. But I've heard you say something before when I attended some training with you, which always stuck with me, which is this work works. And I guess that's essentially what you just said there is that, well, the proof is in the pudding, which is that you tried it out for yourself and with clients and it was effective.
That's right. And that's the only thing that matters. I mean, we can all have our opinions and our prejudices and our neat little kind of wrapped up ideas of what life and reality is about. But if we're to be real and honest, we have to go and check these things out for ourselves. Like that's the thing about shamanism is described as the path of direct revelation, spiritual democracy. There's no doctrine involved. You don't have to follow any religion or any leader, any guru. And that's why I love this work, because it's simply about you changing your state of awareness and consciousness through the drum or some other method or means, tuning into your own inner wisdom, going into the cosmic consciousness and downloading the information directly for yourself. There's no intermediary. There's no guru, priest, rabbi, or therapist telling you what to believe. And I'm that kind of person. I don't like to be told what to believe or not to believe. And I'm very much a doubting Thomas. If I don't see the wound, I'm going to look for evidence and proof that it works. And that's why like about shaman, it's experiential and it's practical and there's no dogma involved. And everybody has their own road into this world, this other world. And simply by just tuning in, changing your awareness, and being open to be surprised by what happens. Because people, I make the most skeptical people. Like at the moment, I'm running the Shamanic Practitioners course at the moment. And I have a doctor, there's a guard, there's a clinical psychologist. I've had priests and nuns come to the courses before. And I'm sitting there, wow, this is something, And Again, they hear me say what I just said to you. This is the path of direct revelation. Just do the journey. And like when they've been open to it, they have seen real changes in their lives happening because they have taken a look within themselves, doing the inner work. And that's good enough in itself. That's the realm of psychotherapy and psychology. But when you tune into the fact that you're an aspect of the cosmic consciousness here in this third density reality, but you have the ability to tune into the whole, into the cosmic consciousness, because you're a part of that. You're none different from that. We're all part of the one consciousness. And if you do that and ask for help, ask for healing, you'll get it. But the problem for most people is they don't ask for help and they don't ask for healing. And they also have a mindset that has been programmed into them by the matrix system that this is bullshit. This doesn't work. It's all crap. Why would I try that? Like, I mean, it's all a hook-up. Yeah. So put that aside, as I say. Try it. See what happens. Be open to be surprised. And then, see where your skepticism is, then put it to the test. That's all you have to do. And nobody's going to tell you you're right or wrong. Just try it out and see what happens.
Yeah. I'm also curious about something you said, because you talked about the indigenous people and the shamans and the practice, and then you referred to yourself as a shamanic practitioner and you train shamanic practitioners in Ireland. What's your thought process about that, about the link to indigenous people? Because obviously there hasn't been indigenous people in Ireland in quite some time. And also this thought process you have around people referring to themselves in the here and now as shamanic practitioners rather than shamans. I'm just curious about your perspective on that.
In indigenous cultures, the actual shaman never refers to themselves as a shaman, because their idea of philosophy is that they're a hollow bone, they're a channel for the divine spirit energy to come through them, work through them, in order to help and heal other people. And they're in service to the community, the healer, philosopher, priest of the community. But they don't take on the belief or the mantle that they are the ones doing it. You never hear shamans that they are a healer or they're a shaman. So that in itself is, and I have a bit of a bugbear about people who go around calling themselves shamans, because it's an affront to indigenous people to do that. And secondly, it's okay if you want to call yourself a shamanic practitioner if you've done proper training and you know what you're talking about, because essentially what you're doing is you're using shamanic methods, means and techniques in a way that our ancestors would have used, that are still available to us. Like, just because we don't have an ancestral lineage of shamanism, say in Ireland or England or Europe, doesn't mean that we cannot tune into the ancestral energy field, relate to the ancestral energy within us, we're carrying in our genetic makeup, and use that knowledge in a modern day context. And like much of what we call psychotherapeutic techniques today, whether it be NLP, deep trance work, breath work, all these techniques, methods and means, you look deeply enough and you find that the shamans of ancient times were using those techniques, sound therapy, whatever you want to call it. You look at Jean Achterberg, wrote a great book called Imagery and Healing. She calls it, the subtitle is Shamanism and Modern Medicine, where she's looking at guided imagery, visualization, meditation, trance work for the healing of cancer, physical ailments, physical illnesses, biofeedback, neurofeedback, all these different methods and means that people are coming at as if they've reinvented the wheel here. Shamans have been using all those techniques and still do in indigenous cultures for millennia. So when people say, oh, shamans was an ancient practice that, it's lost to us, it's not lost to us at all. In some ways, we're reviving it, certainly, and it's becoming more into the fore. And my shamanic work has never been more popular. The courses book up 6 months in advance, because what I'm finding, and people are flying in from abroad, because people are now waking up to the idea that they need to take on their own spiritual autonomy, that there's more to life than the simulated reality that we see in our digital world nowadays. And they're also kind of turning away from this transhumanist digital AI synthetic reality. And what they're looking for is a more organic, spiritual, humanistic connection to source. And shamanism, you know, the shamanic techniques provide that for us. Because if you want to know something, go out, stop awareness and talk to the animals, the trees and the earth. And if you're open enough, the answers will come to you. You know, I'd rather trust that than ChatGPTing it, you know, because, I mean, I'm more orientated towards what I call natural wisdom or natural intelligence as opposed to artificial intelligence. Not that there's anything wrong with technology per se. We're on it right now. We're using it for good. But I think there's a danger here in the times we're in that AI will take over our thinking for us. It will take over our spiritual sense for us. And if people aren't careful, by disconnecting from their ancestral wisdom, if they're not careful, they could end up in a situation where they live in a synthetic world, in a virtual reality game, rather than playing the cosmic game. And I got that on a download from my guides one time, said, play the game that's playing you. And when I looked into that, it was like, you know, there's a cosmic game going on. You're part of it, you know. Wake up to that. And the way you play that game is through non-ordinary states of awareness, doing your inner work, not being... And another download I got was the hard way is the easy way and the easy way is the hard way. The easy way is lying around watching Netflix and scrolling on your phone all the time and, you know, getting your dopamine hits and becoming dead inside. That's easy, but it's hard way in the long run because you lose your soul. The hard way is doing the inner work, the meds as I call it, meditation, exercise, diet, and spiritual practice. That takes effort, it takes energy, but the rewards are connection to your own soul and to your own divinity and your own cosmic consciousness and your soul's destiny. Like, why are you here? Is this just an accidental thing that you just ended up in the physical body you're in, identifying with who you think you are? Is there more to that? Is there a transpersonal perspective to you? Is the story you're telling yourself or you have been told by others, is that who you are? Is that who you think you are? Because what if there's more to you than that? Are you prepared to stretch your ego mind, to look beyond the culturally inculcated version of you, who you were told you should be, what the media is telling you should be? Are you prepared to think for yourself? Are you prepared to explore these other worlds? Because that's the only game in town. And unfortunately, many people are not prepared to do that because they prefer the easy way, which in the long term will turn out to be the hard way for them.
Martin, I'm really intrigued as well because a lot of what I have been talking to people about on this podcast is in somewhat kind of individualistic or focused on people exploring who they are. And, you know, I think that is definitely an important element. Yeah. And now more than ever in the world we're in 2025, it feels to me that actually tapping into collective identity is also really important. And I know that would have been something that was very much part of Indigenous way of living.
Yes.
And kind of community, I suppose. What's your perspective on that?
On living as an individual and on trying to discover our own individuality. Well, you know, I think most human beings haven't a clue who they are. Many are searching for answers to that, and that's a good thing. But unfortunately, you know, we are very much open to being predated upon nowadays in terms of being loosed into a particular perspective that is not about our own best interests, but it suits a bigger agenda or a wider agenda. And that is to kind of corral us like sheep into a particular philosophical camp, one or the other. It's divide and conquer. It's you against me, your religion, your gender, your philosophical bent, your whatever the color of the day is. And then you see people nailing their flag to one side or the other, whereas I think it's more important to sit in the center and find your own center of your true being, not the programming that you've been put into, and tune into the soul essence, the spark of divinity that's in you. Check in with that, and don't be pulled one side or the other because it's all a game. And then be present to yourself, and that involves looking at the idea of your soul's destiny. Why did your soul incarnate into this reality at this time, and for what purpose and for what reason? What are you here to learn? Because as some would say, and the great spiritual philosophers say, that we're in a spiritual boot camp. we're here to be tested, and that there's no mistakes or accidents, only lessons. And the lessons are to wake up to become fully aware of the illusion that we live in. And this is what the Hindus talk about, the Maya, that we're in an illusion. And more you're hearing people talk about this AI-generated simulation, that we're like in some sort of a computer game being played by, some avatar somewhere else. And that the real goal of our existence is to orientate our spirit, our compass towards the spiritual awakening. And that involves simply waking up to any so-called sacred cows or truths that we hold on to, that we over-identify with, and we think that's who we are. And then we have an opportunity to transcend the matrix control system. Because as some would say, we live in a trauma-induced matrix control system. If you really go deep on this one, they say, which is a farm for the soul, where Bob Monroe say we're loosed of our energy in this reality, and that we're kept trapped in this particular simulation. And the goal of our soul is to wake up, see through the illusion, and transcend it. As Bob Monroe would have said, when we die, we generate enough awareness and escape velocity so that we can see through the karmic miasma of the lower astral plane, so that we can transcend it and go beyond that. Now, I know a lot of people who are beginning to wake up to that, because we're living in a time, what some people have described, there's an etheric tide coming in from the collective unconscious that is awakening people at their own unconscious level. Now, that is triggering people. That's getting them into their stuff. And unfortunately, what's happening there is that gets projected onto everybody and everything around them. But the moment we start doing it in our, and as Carl Jung said, if you want to do something for the world, start by withdrawing your own projections from it. Take it all back in. Look at yourself. And then you see you're in line to achieve the biggest prize of all, which is your own soul, which is the most precious thing you have. And then you see everything else as smoke and mirrors, and you're no longer easily played and manipulated by the latest trend on social media or whatever's going on. And you have autonomy then within yourself.
What's your thoughts, Martin, on, because I think autonomy is a really important goal, and I pursue that both personally and with my clients professionally as well. I know that there has been a growing movement in the last, let's say, maybe 10 years, particularly in the last 5, I think, since COVID, around collective autonomy. Some people use the word homonomy, which is this idea that we need to come together in community or in unison to find a way through. What would be the shamanic perspective on that, of people living a lifetime now, but as well as exploring your own relationship to self and finding autonomy within yourself, doing that with others?
Yes. Well, Indigenous people always live in community and small knit tribal groups where everybody in that community was minded and looked after, from the children were collectively raised by the tribe. They had rituals and ceremonies for everything that people were going through, including death, and people were never alone in that regard. And I think that's a big part of what has happened in our world, the fracturing of community units, where people give mutual support to each other and encourage each other to grow in each other's presence by being in conscious relationships with each other, and that is not projecting their shadows onto each other. I agree. I think a model for a sustainable society going forward would be small communities growing their own food, organic farming, living collectively, bringing back some of the old indigenous rituals and ceremonies, and marking the time of year, whether it be Bealtaine or Samhain or the different festivals of the year, and having a collective caring environment to grow up in and grow old in and to die in, and to help each other on their journey through that. And I see at the moment a movement towards that in our world, in our culture. I think we're going to see massive changes in our world in the coming times. Particularly now that Saturn has moved into Aquarius. When the last time that happened, we had the French Revolution and the American War of Independence. I see a bifurcation happening in society where there's a splitting. One side of it is going to be this transhumanist synthetic reality, maybe living in 15-minute cities where we're living in a digital reality, in a digital world. And on the other side, I think there will be some people who are more self-aware, more tuned in, and maybe perhaps more rebellious, who will move away from that and into a more organic, sustainable communities living together and helping and supporting each other. So I think there will be a split. There'll be a bifurcation happening, all right. But I'm on the side of what you're talking about, the community helping and supporting each other grow and survive in the coming times.
Lots of food for thought there, Martin. Thank you for sharing so much. What would be your kind of parting word or thought or sentiment as we bring this episode to a close?
We're living in very interesting times, as the Chinese would say. The change is going to happen so rapid in our coming times that we will not recognize the world that we used to live in. And we need to start preparing for that now in relation to what you just spoke there about the community. But also, we need to become more organically orientated and less synthetically, digitally orientated. Because what's at stake here, and I mean this, really mean this, is our soul. Because if we get loose down into the transhumanist AI synthetic simulated virtual reality, which is part of the way or what's occurring in the world at the moment, then we have a real danger of merging with the machine, this transhumanist aspect of we're wearing the technology, we're next is implanted in our brain or whatever. The organic way, and this is what I notice in terms of what's happening in the world in terms of what we talk about now, neurodiversity nowadays. And I'm seeing the kids today who are being labeled as autistic, neurodivergent, ADHD, all that kind of thing. I've just studied a fascinating subject recently called the telepathy tapes. These are interviews with parents of children who are nonverbal autistic. And what they've discovered is these children are communicating with their parents and people around them telepathically. So what we have here is an emerging human being, like souls that are incarnating on this earth now, that are being mislabeled, misdiagnosed, and mistreated as neurodivergent, autistic, ADHD, and given medication. What we may be witnessing here, actually, is the emergence of a new type of human being, and that these souls that are incarnating now, that are being treated as psychiatric or abnormal, are actually the vanguard of a new human that is more advanced, more able to communicate telepathically, has a higher vibrational soul frequency, and that they are very much needed on this planet at this time. So what's happening to them? They're being pushed into schools and programmed by the educational system and being made feel that there's something wrong with them because the old system's dying. And when an old system is dying, it doesn't want to let go of, its control. So these new kids, these new souls that are coming in, I see great hope in them for the future of humanity. And I applaud people like you and others who are flying that banner, and you're not lying down and you're rebelling against the system. In my day, I rebelled against the system in the 1967, a different way. And I'm glad to see that I have people like you and others that I can pass that mantle and flag on to when I'm done with my bit, but I'm not done with it for the moment, or not for a long time yet. But I see people like you coming up now who are standing your ground. You've been through tough times. You've been dismembered and gone through the growing pains of the soul. And you're using your suffering to forge an identity and a soul's temperament that you won't back down, you won't lie down, and you're going to change things. And that's my parting words.
Thank you, Martin. It's great to have this conversation with you. And I agree with a lot of what you've just shared there around an evolutionary period that I think we don't fully understand yet. And yeah, in some ways, it's actually very exciting to be alive and witnessing such a substantive change in how we understand life and people, because I definitely think neurodiversity from my perspective is definitely an evolutionary shift from what I can understand within myself and my own identity and the hundreds of neurodiverse people that I encounter and work with. Martin, a question for our next guest. What would you like to ask them?
I'd like to ask the next guest, what was the pivotal moment in their lives when they started to wake up and realize that they were more than just a physical body, their ego, mind, and their programming? What was the spark that woke them up? Was it a book? Was it a movie? Was it a person they met? Something that triggered them to look beyond the programming and see their life as more than just the ordinary everyday matrix control system.
Brilliant. What a great question. Thank you. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Martin.
Yeah, pleasure. It's always great talking to you, John. It's always interesting and stimulating. Thank you very much for inviting me on.
Thank you for listening. I'm curious about what this conversation has stimulated for you. Thoughts, feelings, curiosity. If this episode intrigued you, hit follow to be notified about new episodes. I know these conversations are valuable to me, and if you think they're valuable too, please do leave a review. Leaving a review allows more people to discover the podcast. You can scroll down to ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts and click write a review. You can also connect with Becoming You on Instagram and TikTok by searching the handle at becoming_you__. The links are in the show notes too. You can also visit www.becomingyou.ie to explore the idea of becoming yourself. Thanks for tuning in. Bye for now.